It's just 3 weeks until the World Cup kicks off in Qatar, in the culmination of more than a decade of corruption, backhanders, exploitation, human misery, sheer stupidity and death, which has brought us up to this point, one of the most shameful episodes in the history of a sport, which once let Benito Mussolini host a World Cup, and allowed Chile to qualify for the World Cup, whilst using their stadium as a literal torture chamber and death camp. Nonetheless, that probably means that it is high time that I started making a few World Cup videos. I will be doing a prediction video at some stage, like everyone does, but only once the squads have been announced. But in advance of that, I thought that it might be fun to take a look at which World Cup team is best endowed in every position. Some of you may recall that I made a similar video to this one a few years back, but that wasn't World Cup specific and it was ages ago, so a lot has changed since then. To be clear, this isn't just which national team has the best player in each position. In attacking midfield, for instance, you could make a case for Argentina and Belgium with Lionel Messi and Kevin De Bruyne on that front, but neither Argentina nor Belgium have immense depth in that position. So by strongest, I mean a combination of both that raw star power in terms of the team's standout player in the position, but also their strength in depth and competition for places there. Right. Without further ado, here is the World Cup team that I think is strongest in each position. Goalkeeper, Brazil. Starting in goal, because starting anywhere else would be the behaviour of a certified psychopath, and I don't think that there is a really obvious standout candidate. The Germans were my first thought, as they so often are, especially given Kevin Trapp's outstanding form at Eintracht Frankfurt last season. Manuel Neuer is obviously Germany's number one, and though he is currently sidelined with an injury, he is widely expected to be back in time for the World Cup, which will be his fourth as Germany's number one, having won the tournament in 2014, a year in which he also finished third in Ballon d'Or voting. Then you have got Marc-Andre ter Stegen, Bernd Leno, and Oliver Baumann, though obviously only 3 of the 5 keepers that I just mentioned will actually make Germany's World Cup squad. And I would imagine that they will be Neuer, ter Stegen, and Trapp. So Germany are undoubtedly really strong candidates. Meanwhile, France and England both have lots of depth, but nowhere near the star power or outstanding number one of Germany or Brazil. And it should be noted that Poland, despite not being one of the World Cup's big hitters, have a raft of really decent goalies, most notably Wojciech Szczesny and Łukasz Fabianski. Though, obviously, the latter has now retired from international football, so can't be considered for the purposes of this video. Why did you bring him up then, Alfie? Dunno really. Moving on. Brazil take it narrowly ahead of Germany, just as they did in the 2002 World Cup final, by virtue of the fact that I think Alisson is absolutely outstanding, arguably the best goalkeeper in the world right at this moment in time, and one of few Liverpool players to actually have maintained their standards this season. Ederson is also very good and would start for almost every other national team, and even Weatherton, who will almost certainly take that third spot at the World Cup behind those two, has always been a really good keeper, hence why the likes of Neto at Bournemouth can never get a look in. There is very little to split Germany and Brazil in my eyes. Germany have better depth, but Ederson is one hell of an understudy, and Alisson's fine form, whilst Neuer is injured, just about convinced me to pick Brazil. Pretty much, though, on the toss of a coin. Right back, England. It's no secret that England have a bewildering array of talent in the right back position, though viewers from outside of England may be unaware that Gareth Southgate's selection dilemma there will be forcibly reduced in Qatar. That is because both Kyle Walker and Reece James, England's 2 best right-backs, certainly in Southgate's eyes, both picked up recent injuries, widely expected to rule them out of the tournament. Neither have actually ruled themselves out, despite the fact that Walker was forced to go under the knife, and James currently cannot walk without crutches, and both are expected to be named in England's provisional 55-man squad, though the final 26 will be a big ask, and I would be shocked, certainly if both were on the plane. That opened up the door for Portugal at right back, who also have a real abundance of talent on the right side of fullback, especially since that is where João Cancelo plays for them. On top of Cancelo, you have got Diogo Dalot, Nelson Semedo, Cedric Suarez, and Ricardo Pereira. Not literally on top of Cancelo, I should clarify. I imagine that would be deeply uncomfortable for him. I just mean in terms of strength in depth. That means that Portugal would be very worthy inclusions at right back, but despite the asterisks beside both the names of Kyle Walker and Reece James, it is difficult to overlook the fact that England still have Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is, regardless of his current form, still the most creative fullback on the planet, James Justin, who has been in inspired form this season, and most notably of all Kieran Trippier, who is in the form of his life right now at Newcastle United, and has always been a favourite of Gareth Southgate's. Again, it speaks volumes about England's depth that the likes of Tariq Lamptey and Kyle Walker-Peters don't even get a mention. So, despite those injuries, they still just about edge it. Left back, France. After missing out at right back, Portugal are unfortunate once again to miss out at left back, and I would actually have picked them if João Cancelo played as a left back for Portugal, like he does predominantly for Manchester City. Rafael Guerreiro, Nuno Mendes, and Mario Rui make up Portugal's contingent of extremely gifted left backs, which is some going. Meanwhile, neighbours Spain can offer up Jordi Alba and Jose Gaya as their two fantastic left backs, who will almost certainly travel to the World Cup, with Juan Bernat, Sergio Reguilon, Marcos Alonso, and several others waiting in the wings. Nonetheless, the Iberian rivals are both usurped at left back in favour of France, who don't quite have the same depth as Spain waiting in the wings, but will have two of the best left backs in world football, better than even Jordi Alba and Jose Gaya in my eyes, in their squad in Qatar. I am referring to Theo Hernandez and Ferland Mendy, with Lucas Hernandez and Lucadinha also able to offer cover there. That is quite some going, and it is enough to give France the edge, at least as far as I'm concerned. Centre-back, France. It is consecutive inclusions for the reigning world champions, and France's depth at centre-back is quite frankly an absolute joke. Les Bleus are blessed with the likes of Jules Koundé, Dayo Upamecano, Wesley Fofana, Nordi Mukele, Raphael Varane, Presnel Kimpembe, Kurt Zouma, Clement Lenglet, Lucas Hernandez, Benjamin Pavard, William Saliba, and I really could go on for about another 3 minutes, and I would still be naming centre-backs who would start for at least 25 of the 32 teams at the upcoming World Cup. Of course, only 3 of them are likely to start at the World Cup, or possibly even only 2, with maybe 5 making the squad. But they will still be the best 2, 3, or 5 at the entire tournament. France's most formidable competition for the centre-back position comes in the forms of great rivals, Germany and the Netherlands. Germany have a hell of a starting pairing in Antonio Rudiger and Niklas Zula, with Nico Schlotterbeck not too far behind. Meanwhile, the Netherlands have still, one could argue, the best centre-back on the planet in the form of Virgil van Dijk, along with the likes of Matthijs de Ligt, Stefan de Vrij, Daley Blind, Sven Botman, and Nathan Ake. It is bloody good going, especially for a nation of fewer than 20 million people, but it isn't enough to feature ahead of France, who have about as much depth at centre-back as the rest of the world combined. Holding and central midfield. Spain. I have combined holding, defensive and central midfield as just one position, even though it obviously isn't the same position, because there are some quite tricky fringe cases where it is hard to pin a player down as being just one, so it is easier to throw them all in as a collective. The toughest choice out of every position, I found it practically impossible here to split Germany and Spain, who, interestingly enough, are in the same group at the World Cup, so we will get to see their respective midfields lock on very early on. Meanwhile, a couple of smaller countries deserve very well-earned honourable mentions in midfield. Firstly, though, Germany can boast the likes of Ilkay Gundogan, Leon Goretzka, Maximilian Arnold, and Julian Weigl in central and holding midfield, along with arguably the finest holding midfielder in all of world football, namely Joshua Kimmich. Germany's midfield ranks would be even stronger if it weren't for the fact that Toni Kroos retired following defeat to England at Euro 2020. Spain, on the other hand, who have had midfielders coming out of their ears for the last 20 years it feels like, can offer up the likes of Rodri, Sergio Busquets, Pedri, Koke, and Gavi in terms of those likely to make their squad, and I won't even bother reeling off all of the names of those likely to miss out since it is about as long as France's list of possible centre-backs. You can see the dilemma that I had then, and it is the only position that I actually flip-flop between a few times, but in the end, I have given it to Spain. The option of Rodri or Busquets sitting with Pedri and then either Gavi or Koke in front of them, ultimately, I think is surely the strongest midfield at the tournament. Meanwhile, Brazil might have been worth a shout if Fabinho wasn't in such poor form, given the talents of the likes of Casemiro, Lucas Paqueta, and Bruno Guimaraes, yet still, somehow, Fred routinely starts for them. That isn't me taking a swipe at Fred, and I don't think that he is a bad player, I just think that there are a fair few Brazilians better than him in his position. But what do I know? In terms of the smaller nations punching above their weight, it's no secret that Croatia have had an outstanding midfield for many years now, and still do, thanks to the likes of Mateo Kovacic, Mario Pasalic, Marcelo Brozovic, Nikola Vlasic, and captain Luka Modric. Meanwhile, Uruguay must surely have one of the most underrated midfields at the tournament, with Fede Valverde arguably the most in-form midfielder on the planet right now, accompanied by the likes of Rodrigo Bentancur, Matias Vecino, and Lucas Torreira in central and defensive capacities alone. Attacking midfield. Portugal. There was no obvious standout in attacking midfield. I mentioned Argentina and Belgium during the introduction, with Lionel Messi and Kevin De Bruyne, who nearly got them over the line on their own. And maybe if Paulo Dybala was firing on all cylinders rather than out-injured for the World Cup, Argentina would have been in with a shout. Germany have some very talented attacking midfielders, with the likes of Marco Reus, Florian Wirtz, Kai Havertz, teenage sensation Jamal Musiala, and the ever-dependable Thomas Müller. Meanwhile, the nation Musiala could also have represented, namely England, also have a lot of good options in attacking midfield, whether that be James Maddison, Jack Grealish, Mason Mount, Conor Gallagher, and most notably of all, Phil Foden. Germany, Argentina, and England are all just about edged out by Portugal, though, I think, who arguably have three world-class attacking midfielders in Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, and João Felix, plus Otavio and Matheus Nunes, and the case for them would be further strengthened by 29-year-old Benfica star Rafa Silva, if it wasn't for the fact that he retired from international football just last month, citing personal reasons. Right wing. Spain. If you were to mark Lionel Messi down as a right winger, given that Argentina have Angel Di Maria on the right flank, along with the likes of Angel Correa and Lucas Ocampos, I would have given this one to them. Messi doesn't play as a right winger, or not predominantly at least, for either club or country anymore though. He plays as a number 10, often with a heat map of an 8, despite enjoying one of the best seasons of his life in terms of goal contributions. Without Messi, whilst Argentina still look very strong on the right flank, I don't think they are the best equipped team at the World Cup, though it must be said, there is a surprising lack of competition and standout candidates for this one. The strongest, I think, just about, are Spain, who are likely to start Ferran Torres on the right wing in Qatar, but will have the likes of Marco Asensio and Pablo Sarabia waiting in the wings. Ansu Fati is also just as capable of playing on the right as he is on the left, though I didn't include him because it isn't where he is likely to play at the World Cup. Spain's depth on the right flank is such that Atletico club star and virtually uninjurable man Inaki Williams recently decided to represent Ghana instead, so with a little outstanding competition, they take this one. Left wing. Brazil. There is much more competition, it must be said, on the left flank, where England, France and Brazil all have excellent options. I would expect Raheem Sterling to start on the left flank for England at the World Cup, as Gareth Southgate's most experienced and most capped player at this stage, who was England's starman at the Euros. He'll be backed up by Jack Grealish and, I suspect, Marcus Rashford, with Jadon Sancho likely to miss out on the final 26. Meanwhile, Bukayo Saka, who could even start for England on the right, can also play wide on the left. Then you have France, who, oddly enough, didn't even play with a left winger in their two most recent internationals. Didier Deschamps appears to be caught in two minds between playing a 3-4-1-2 or a 4-3-3 formation at the World Cup, which means Kylian Mbappé could play either on the left of a front three or as one of a central two up front. Nonetheless, France do have Mbappé, Kingsley Coman and Christopher Nkunku as options on the left, who are likely to make their final squad, with Thomas Lemar, Moussa Diaby, Alan Saint-Maximin, and many others waiting in the wings. Both England and France are trumped, quite comfortably in fact though, by Brazil, whose prowess on the left flank is enough to strike fear into the hearts of every team at the tournament. Brazil will most likely play effectively with 4 forwards at the World Cup, which should be sensational to watch. And it is Vinicius Jr., who I would expect to be the furthest left of those 4. Of course, Neymar can also play wide left, but is likely to play as a 10 at the World Cup. Then you have got Alisson, who plays primarily on the left at club level, but will probably be Brazil's starting number 9 in Qatar, with Gabriel Martinelli performing the role of very capable deputy on the left. Both Rafinha and Rodrigo can also play on either side, so this one was pretty straightforward as a W for the Seleção. Centre forward, France. Okay, hear me out, but in terms just of depth, whilst they do only have one bona fide, genuinely world-class centre forward, England really are spoilt for choice when it comes to who Kane's probable 2 understudies will be. The likes of Ivan Toney, Tammy Abraham, Callum Wilson and Dominic Calvert-Lewin are all really good backup options, as is Marcus Rashford, if you mark him down as a centre forward. Meanwhile, Villa duo Ollie Watkins and Danny Ings haven't even been mentioned. I don't envy Gareth Southgate having to pick a final 3 from those 5 or 6, hence why I have given England an honourable mention, but the fact that France have 2 of the best centre forwards on the planet means that it really has to be them. As I said previously, it's unclear just yet whether we will see Kylian Mbappé playing wide left or through the middle, but if it is through the middle, it will be alongside Karim Benzema, a man who just won his first Ballon d'Or at the age of 34 and has been absolutely sensational for the last 3 years. Even after those 2, France still have Olivier Giroud, who is no spring chicken, it must be said, but has enjoyed a really bright start to the season in Serie A and is just 2 goals off equalling Thierry Henry's record as France's all-time top scorer, and Wissam Ben Yedder, who belongs firmly to whatever you call the bracket immediately below world-class players, has been in devastating form for Monaco once again this season and would start for virtually every other national team. So it is an easy win for France up front, which concludes our video, and it means that France lead the way as the strongest team, at least in my eyes, in 3 different positions, namely left back, centre back, and centre forward. That is not wholly surprising. France's depth is very well documented. Meanwhile, Brazil and Spain both came out on top in 2 positions, with England and Portugal taking 1 position each. As is so often the case, despite not actually featuring, Germany almost featured in 3 different positions. Mightily unfortunate not to be my pick in goal, close contenders at centre-back, neck and neck with Spain in holding and central midfield, and bested only by Portugal in attacking midfield. Come to think of it, that's 4 positions, isn't it, Alfie, not 3. Right, anyway, that is it for today's video. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. As ever when I'm covering the World Cup, there is a link on your screen now to my documentary about the World Cup in Qatar, which I think might be a bit biased, but I think is worth watching. Anyway, you can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so. Have a brilliant day.